Hi, everyone. Today I'm here with Bob Rogers from Oii.ai. I will let him introduce himself and then we can take it from there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Rogers. I am co-founder and chief product and technology officer at Oii.ai. Before founding Oii.ai, I was expert in residence for AI at University of California, San Francisco, and was before that chief data scientist at Intel, where I led Intel's partner ecosystem for analytics and AI. Been involved in a few different startups in the AI machine learning space. Started my career with a PhD in physics, where I built digital twins of supermassive black holes in other galaxies. And that led me to a number of computational areas, including artificial neural networks, which has led to all of these amazing AI and LLM models we see out there in the world today.
Amazing. From black holes to supply chains. But we will go into that. I feel there are some similarities, but I'm not sure I will be the right to speak about it.
I know that chief supply chain officers don't want to throw their money down a black hole in the supply chain.
Here you go. Now we have a #1 correlation. But before we start, I really want to share with everybody problems that I was seeing again and again when talking to customers in the past, when I was in the industry. What I realized, I took about 1 million shipments, database of shipments from China to the US. And all the time I heard customers complaining, your transit time is not good enough, your transit time is not well, you're not coming on time. And I'm like, why are you complaining? At the port-to-port level, I see something relatively okay. You know, it was not perfect. If you promise 15 days, you get 15 days. It was like plus minus 2-3 days, nothing big of a difference. But when I looked at the end-to-end, so from the moment it get into a port in China until in the DC of the customer here in the US, that's where things started to go wild. And I got 30 days to 120 days. And that's something that woke me up, to say the least. I asked customers, what are you doing? And they kind of, most of them taking the 90 something percentile. And you see that, you know, it's a lot of days that it sits into ERP, but it's in the inventory, but not yet real ready to their customers' needs. And that's where I kind of, first time I met you, I was still working for my other company. And I remember I was like, you're saying something that very, very much resonates to me. That's why I really want people to hear what you have to say. Do you see similarities in the way you work, or do you see different things?
No, absolutely aligned. I remember those conversations about lead time and, most importantly, lead time variability. When the core principle, and actually, if we go back to the black hole thing, I was building simulations to understand in an experimental context what would happen if different things changed in a complex environment like a black hole. A supply chain is no different. You've got lots of pieces moving. There are ways that a small delay early on in the process leads to a knock-on effect later on. What we do at Oii is simulate that entire end-to-end supply chain. We see exactly what you described. The entire process of getting product to customers through an entire distribution network, all the little delays and impacts are additive. And so the variability at the delivery end can be very high, even if the incremental impacts in each leg are not that large. There's huge alignment there. The thing I've really focused on in our modeling is what are the financial impacts of those various delays and variabilities? How much buffer stock do you need to carry to overcome variability? And then flipping that around, what is the value of reducing lead time variability or other variabilities in your supply chain so that you know how much to spend to press down the various factors? And so, yeah, 100% alignment with what you observed.
Interesting. So now you're saying you basically apply AI to the complex supply chain decisions that customers have. Now, if you can give maybe 2 or 3 concrete decisions that your customers actually make differently because of your solution, your platform,
Yeah.
and what trade-offs they're actually explicitly choosing in each case, because there's always a trade-off here.
So yes, trade-offs are critical. Everything is a game of trade-offs. One of the interesting things in our world is customers may want to make different trade-offs at different times and different stages in their business, and also for different product families in different regions, depending on how the market is perceiving their products and performance. I love the question, and having been an actual AI practitioner since day one, I like the opportunity to talk about real impact instead of just labeling your product as AI because you use ChatGPT in the background. This is great. The first example is a real bread and butter story for us. If you think about a distribution network, getting product from suppliers, potentially through manufacturing or kitting, and then through the distribution network to customers, there are a number of parameters that control your inventory policy or your replenishment. Your safety stock and your reorder frequency are the two most critical ones on an MTS approach. Our system analyzes the way a supply chain is set up, all the SKUs, all the sites, all the connections, looks at the financial impacts of different ways of moving material around, how much inventory you're holding, et cetera, and then makes recommendations for changes to safety stock and reorder frequency that can be applied directly into the ERP or the planning system. A nice bread and butter set of recommendations tells you you can achieve your service level targets with minimum cost if you change your safety stock to this and your reorder frequency stock to this. It will do it automatically for the entire portfolio of products across all the sites. The trade-off is then, well, you are going to impact service if you reduce or increase safety stock, for example. You're going to know exactly what those trade-offs are and why you're making them. Quite often, we find that you can reduce overall inventory across the entire supply chain while ensuring that every single product is hitting its service because you're moving where the inventory is being held. So that's a really nice, solid day-to-day example.
Now, are you doing it on a SKU level, or are you taking like multiple SKUs at once? Because a company with 50,000 SKUs will be very, very difficult to do something like this one by one.
So the analysis is always performed SKU by SKU, but then you can organize and group, you can automate the implementation of things. As a practitioner of AI automation for many years, I always recommend that customers set thresholds. Any change below this, either financial impact or operational impact, should go through into the ERP automatically or with a minimal review process. And then things that are bigger impact, you can have a human in the loop. All of a sudden, you're making thousands or tens of thousands of changes that each one of them isn't going to cause a catastrophic breakdown. When you fix all those tens of thousands of things, it's sort of the opposite of death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like the cure. It's like the 1,000. So it becomes very manageable to make these changes. We always rank order all the recommendations so that if you had thousands of things you could do, you know what the first 10 things are that will have the biggest impact. Pareto's law typically applies. You can get 80% of the impact by changing 10 to 20% of the parameters. There's a few different ways to economize and make it so that it's not overwhelming. At the end of the day, we really move the needle for the entire supply chain, not just those few A-class items that you're most concerned about. Another example for AI decisions would be, we have a customer right now who's looking at moving suppliers from China to Morocco. For a particular class of products, they have a viable supplier in Morocco. The cost profile is different. Obviously, the lead time and the risks to that lead time are different. The performance of the suppliers may be different also. Your China supplier might deliver exactly when they say they're going to, day in and day out, the number that you ordered, and maybe the Morocco supplier is less reliable, or maybe it's the other way around. Our customer can quickly create a what-if scenario And this can be done through an AI interface. You describe what you want to do. For these products, I want to move to this supplier in Morocco with this cost profile and this performance profile. The AI will build the entire simulation for you based on your current design. It will make the changes and then optimize it. You can compare the best version of your current network with the best version of that hypothetical network. And now it's a no-brainer to make the decision whether or not to move suppliers. Interestingly, I had one customer say, well, I found out, I made a decision. This was before they started using Goldilocks. They had made a decision to change suppliers. And then they had to change back because the supplier was not entirely transparent about their performance reliability and the ability to do what if scenarios. I asked him, did you suspect they were being optimistic? And he said, sure, yeah, I did. You put that into the analysis and you can immediately see that, yeah, it's great the way they presented it, but if they actually perform the way I'm afraid they might, it would break the deal. Lab where you can do these experiments without actually making changes is incredibly powerful for mitigating risk and really examining a decision from multiple sides. The third one would be related. We often have customers who acquire companies and then have multiple distribution centers in the same region. The question is, should we consolidate those distribution centers and what would be the financial and operational benefits? Once again, the AI can build up those scenarios and compare the optimized version of the current design with the optimized version of the hypothetical design. It makes it very clear what you're trading off. So you ask about trade-offs. You're going to save some operational cost having one distribution site instead of two. However, you might have capacity challenges, or you might find that serving some of the customers that are served by that other site, there are challenges there. All of that comes out in the analysis. So you can really decide what's best for the business.
Interesting. Now, you just mentioned a minute or so ago what if scenarios. I like to use the what if scenarios. I'm very fan of that because it's giving you many interesting visions on how you look at things. But some people interpret it as a prediction of the future. Where do you draw the line between decision supports and prediction?
Yeah.
And basically, how do customers more often misunderstood this distinctly?
It's a great question. So if you think about our entire approach, and this is a benefit of having the ability to do simulations, we have the core principle that you can never predict the future. One of the parts of my background that I didn't talk about early on is I founded and ran a quantitative futures hedge fund for 12 years. In that world, I learned the importance of making a prediction and understanding its limitations. Risk management and survival in that business is all about understanding what you don't know as much as what you do. We've built the system, and you may have read that we talk about probabilistic AI as part of our core approach. The idea is we build up thousands of different ways the future could play out. And then we measure any particular design or scenario against all of those thousands of ways. We're not assuming that we know the future because we don't, but we can know a spectrum of ways the future might play out. Abilities are about demand because your demand never looks exactly like your forecast. There's noise there. Lead time and lead time variability, supplier variability, all of those factors go into building that future view. Something we have in prototype is looking even beyond that to external factors. Is there likely for a particular set of suppliers in a geography a weather impact or a political impact or a change in how port congestion that might be impacting things? So the bottom line is we're not predicting the future so much as we're predicting the different ways the future might play out, and the implications of each part is typically driven by users having something they want to assess. For example, I know that this customer I mentioned earlier, they know that there's an alternative supplier in Morocco that could take the place of a Chinese supplier. What would the trade-offs be? So that setup superimposed on what are all the different variabilities that I don't know, and how could they come back to haunt me? So you don't want to make a decision that saves you 10%, but has an 80% chance of really biting you in the back.
Definitely make a lot of sense to think this way and solve problem by trying all the different use cases to find what looks better. When I was working with startups, I saw the approach that not always worked for me. Sometimes people, hey, database connection would be so easy, or, they came up with ideas that in a large organization, it's not happening, it's you're too optimistic. So any, very short advice to startups or customers that want to work with startups, but there's a lot of friction at the beginning, how to overcome those type of things. Just if you can just share something from your experience.
I can definitively say that as a startup, listen to your customers. And people think they do this, but quite often, when you're a startup, you have a technology or an idea, a hypothesis that you're promoting. And of course, you have to start with something. You've got an innovation, you want to bring that forward. But quite often, people mistake listening to customers and applying confirmation bias. So they're listening for customers to confirm their hypothesis rather than listening to what the customer says and then reading between the lines to understand what is it that they're actually struggling with. I don't trust my planning system and, therefore my inventories are out of whack. Well, what does that actually mean? There's a lack of transparency, trust, or consistency. Listen to those challenges and push that into not just what you talk to customers about, but also what you build. Because at the end of the day, the difference between a successful startup and one that goes out of business is not a huge difference in the product. It's a 2-degree miss from the bullseye. And I've seen that over and over. When you listen, that gives you the corrections to get you right onto the bullseye.
Amazing. Thank you for joining Chain Reaction Lab. I really believe in what you guys are doing. It sounds exciting. I'm sure you're going to help some of the world's supply chains to be improved and the end-to-end to be much smoother than it is. Any last comments on your end, Bob?
Thank you very much for having me. If anybody wants to reach out to me directly, I'm on LinkedIn, or they can email me at bob@oii.ai, and I'd love to hear from them.
Thank you, Bob. Have a great day.